I firmly believe that we are a sum of our parts, in that every interaction and relationship and experience that we have along our way adds up to who we are today. So in investigating how I came to experience design, I went looking for the parts that I've now deposited into my experience design toolkit. So if we go right back to the very beginning, this was my introduction to education. I lived in the middle of nowhere and I would get packages in the post, and inside the package would be a cassette and a bunch of art supplies. And I would listen to the cassette and the instructions from my teacher, let's call them a creative brief, and I would make a thing. And then I would record the stories of how I felt about the thing on the tape, and I'd send it all back and then very excitedly await the next parcel. And so this was my introduction to education, and this is where I firmly settled into curiosity, creativity, and storytelling. Fast forward 12, 13 years, and it was time for me to think about what I wanted to do at university. By this time, I was fascinated with humans and how they experience the world, what they want to do, how they do it, how they follow through, what motivates them, and how they think and feel. So I made the natural choice, to me at the time at least, to go off and study the art of walking in other people's shoes. I went to the big smoke of Toowoomba and studied an acting degree, where I opened my world to empathy. So, after many years of working in theatre, yes, there are some jobs there, and also then marketing and sponsorship and events, because you have to earn a living. Travelling around the world a little, I found myself working here. ACID. ACID was the Australasian CRC for interaction design. That's why we called it ACID. Now, a CRC is a cooperative research centre that's funded by the Commonwealth Government for 7 years to do innovative research. And we had the space of interaction design, so that's the space between people and technology. And we collaborated with students and educators and academics and professionals all over Australia and New Zealand to design user interfaces to create magic in that digital space. And so, as you can imagine, I arrived with my little trusty toolkit of curiosity, creativity, storytelling and empathy, and dove headfirst into research and design. And I was so excited. I got to see and collaborate on some of the most exciting projects that I've ever seen in my life at this point. We got to look at mathematicians who were using photography to build 3D maps to restore relics. We got to work with Indigenous communities and game designers who were creating education tools to pass on their cultural history. Check out that computer. This really does go quite a long way back. And we also got to work with a bunch of really amazing students who were studying interaction design as they built a location-based game that was using mobile technology and augmented reality and also interactive installations to get people out of their houses and exploring the cities, which was pretty extraordinary. So if this photo of this phone doesn't actually give it context, one of the things you need to remember is that Facebook went public in 2006 and iPhone Generation 1 came out in 2007, and all of this happened before then. So, I was lucky enough to be working in the research lab in the design studio at the time. I'm in some of those very dodgy photos on the bookshelf there, but behind the camera in this one. And we got to collaborate with commercial clients. Some of them you may even have heard of. We got to work with Nokia on a geo journey tracker that was to share memories and photographs with your online community. We got to work with Cochlear on the activation of turning on your cochlear implant and hearing for the very first time. And we also got to work with ResMed on their interaction design of their life-saving sleep apnea devices. But one of the projects that I will always remember was one called diversionary therapy devices. So this was a tool that we built to basically distract kids who were burns victims while they were having their bandages changed. This one went into the real world. It became a thing. And it went into clinical trials, and we found out that by using this device, kids' pain scores went down by 70%. such a huge difference. And the really awesome thing for this one, for me, was that I got to work on the product design, I got to work on the story, and I got to record the original voiceover. You know, acting came in handy eventually. So I could see how beneficial it was to have a variety of skills in a design studio. Acid had to close in 2010. That was when it was scheduled to finish the funding round. And many of those researchers have gone on to do extraordinary things since then, championing innovation all over the world at places like Apple and Twitter and Google. And I'm very excited to be able to still be in contact with a lot of those people who are doing extraordinary things. We, as a team, Acid was a pretty close little collaborative team, and we have continued collaborating, even though the company no longer exists, throughout time, and we get together and do cool things occasionally. I'm really super lucky because I get to do that more regularly than most, because I started collaborating with a digital musician who was also a software designer and later became my husband. Yay! So we've worked on plenty of projects since then, but there's a couple that I'd like to talk you through. The very first one that we worked on after we left Acid was at the Queensland State Library, and it was on a digital exhibition. So it was for a 4-month festival that was called the Torres Strait Celebration, obviously celebrating the design and history and heritage of the Torres Strait. And we were given an enormous catalogue of work, of photographs and video, and also audio recordings, and asked to make an interactive exhibition. As you can imagine, each one of those individual pieces in itself was extraordinary. The difficulty and I guess the biggest challenge for us was to find the thread that pulled them all together. So we relied very heavily on research and storytelling to do so. We don't have any photos of that exhibition, unfortunately, so top tip to everybody, please record the things that you're doing and put them in a safe place and back them up sometimes. Let's pretend that didn't happen. And so basically the interactive exhibition was a 20-minute end-to-end walkthrough experience, and the neutral state was dark, and as you walked through, the history and the experiences from the Torres Strait came alive in sound and pictures around you. It was such an exciting project, but one of the very best things about it was collaborating with this guy. He was the curator of the exhibition, and we worked really closely with him to make sure that we were being respectful of all of the material that we had and of the storytelling that we were creating to disclose that information. So some of the other silly things that we've worked on, or fun things that we've worked on, have been a DJ app for iPhone called Mixdex. It's no longer available, thank goodness. And also a HoloLens experience to explore the future of retail. And this one, which was a gesture-based interactive wall that used sentiment analysis to pull from Nike's social media, so that you could walk through the social media experiencing sort of the brand imagery to a soundtrack that we had created. One of the other really, really important and very exciting parts of my design life has been this place. So I got super excited because I was asked to go and teach design research at Billy Blue College of Design. And I was like, oh wow, this is so cool. I'm so excited to share my passion and my enthusiasm for this part of the practice with all these young, enthusiastic, excited young people. And I got so excited, I stayed for 7 years and ended up running the communication design, graphic design and digital media departments in Brisbane. And I learned so much from working with those people. Extraordinary people, like most of you. And probably some of the biggest things I learnt were dedication, tenacity and resilience, and that pushed me to take up some study in psychology. But I think probably the very biggest thing that we all learnt in the process was to trust the process. And that has led me to where I am today. I am an experienced designer at WorkCover Queensland. Now, WorkCover is in the market of workers' compensation, and that's the insurance that an employer pays to support their injured worker with recovery and rehabilitation as they return to work after a workplace injury. And your eyes have all glazed over, and I understand that that doesn't sound like the sexiest place to work in design, and I get that. But after so many years of working in technology with software and plastic, the idea of working with humans was just a little bit blissful. So I started working at WorkCover, and the very first project that I got asked to work on is called Setting Worker Expectations. And this is the project that I'm working on today, and I'd like to just talk you through some of the things that we've learnt along the way and the process that we went through to explore it. So the project started because of a spike in data. Yay for data. Data is amazing. And what we do at WorkCover is every quarter we send out a CX survey, a customer experience survey. You know the ones where you get, you have to rate your experience, 1 to 10 on various different parameters, and there's a space to, verbatim comments. Oh, this is how I feel, and this is why I feel this way. You've probably got 2 or 3 sitting in your inbox right now. So we send them out 4 times a year to 10,000 workers and 20,000 employers. So you can see we're gathering quite a bit of data there. So this spike was found by the business analytics unit, and what happened was they could see that there was a spike in negative numbers with a financial theme. That's what they wrote in the report. What that actually means is more people are giving low scores and saying stuff in the comments like wages, reimbursement, and expenses. So when you added up all of those scores that were categorised that way, the average mark was 2.8 out of 10. Not very good. So the experience design team were asked to dive in and see what we could do about it. So lo and behold, that's what we did. So the very first thing that we did was we dived headface into the data, rolled around in it, enjoyed it, themed it, clustered it. I don't know. I don't know if you get excited about data, but we certainly did. And we came up with heaps of themes, but things like I didn't know, or not understanding the process, or things about being unsure. And so the comment that I guess came to the top for us that really symbolised all of the other things that we were hearing was this one. It's difficult because if you haven't been through it before, you don't know what to expect, and it's the uncertain future that's most concerning. And this was the voice of the customer that we needed to do something about. So what we did, armed with our tools, we knew what we had to do to move forward, so we came up with a how might we statement, a research question, if you will, and basically a focusing question to drive what we were going to do next and to make sure that all the research that we did from here on in really answered the brief. And so we came up with how might we provide an upfront, accessible source of truth to smooth the journey and allow workers to focus on recovery. And every piece of research that we did after that had to meet that question. So we were constantly refocusing to make sure that we weren't wandering off, getting excited about a thing that had nothing to do with what we were trying to do, because it's kind of easy to do, let's be honest. So in the experience design team, we're massive fans of the human-centred design process. The beautiful thing about human-centred design is it's just as it says on the box, you put the human in the centre of the design. And it's also a really handy acronym. So the H also not only stands for human, but also stands for here, which is the first step in the process. That was very convenient audio, thank you very much. So that's what we did. We opened our ears and we heard as much as we possibly could. We interviewed as many people from as many places along the stakeholder map as we could find. We talked to people who were in a claim, people who had had a claim, people who had never had a claim, people who were employers of people who'd had claims, people who were medical providers of people who had claims, and people who worked within WorkCover who were speaking to all of these people all of the time. So we were trying to hear as much as we possibly could. We also looked at the research that was out there in the environment on safe work practices and the return to work statistics for Australia. And we looked at research that we'd put out from projects that we had done previously with places like Monash University and University of Queensland. We also looked at what our competitors were doing, where they were taking risks and where they were playing it safe. And from all of that information, we were basically building a bank of data so that we could direct the movement of the research piece going forward. So we do a 2-week sprint for design at WorkCover, which fits extraordinarily conveniently into the double diamond when we have an 8-week project. So we basically had hit discovery. Now the part that we needed to hit after this was we needed to start talking about what we learned and to then head down the other side of that mountain and make sure we could check back in on our question. Had everything that we'd learned helped us to get closer to the question? And was the question the right question? Because it's very important to question the question. And that sounds ridiculous, but it is very true. So how did we do that? Well, the thing that we did was we put everything all over the walls. We created a design space, and by being transparent about our process and being out loud and proud with our design processes and practices and everything that we were finding out and how we were finding it out, what that meant was that people from all over the organisation could accidentally walk past this. So it wasn't just happening behind a screen. It wasn't just happening inside the project team's head. It was happening all over the walls of our entire floor. And basically, we blocked out the sun. But we were very excited to do so, because what that meant was that people from all across the organisation were interested in what we were doing. They were asking questions. They could see how the research that we were doing was aligning to things that they were interested in or problems that they were facing. So what this did was it got all these people involved and engaged and interested, which, when you're working in a corporate, is sometimes the biggest battle. So being loud and proud and getting everything out of our heads, designing on the outside of our faces, meant that we were able to establish a team of people who were interested to help us take this forward. So that's what we did. We checked in on our question. Yes, we were very happy with what we had, and we'd created a discovery pack. In that discovery pack, it was basically an education piece to unpack what was inside our heads to pass on to all of the people who were going to work with us from this point onwards. And the way we summarised all of the information was to build basically a North Star. We created 5 design principles that gave us a direction, a focusing point. We had to meet all of these to make sure we were on the right track. So they're related to the project, so I'm not going to go through them with you, but basically by creating those design principles, we got everyone on the same page, which was the most important part. And then we moved into create. And what we were doing here was creating as many ideas as possible. So we had firmly moved into the ideation process. So we were developing ideas, creating ideas, and putting them against the lens of desirability, viability, and feasibility. But at this point, it's all about desirable. Is this something someone wants? So have we heard everything that we possibly could in the research that we had done? And how can we make sure that the ideas that we're creating are actually relevant and something that they want, that we're not, okay, well, yeah, here's a vacuum cleaner. Well, that's not going to help me. So what we did was we had a bunch of workshops. Love a workshop. In the very first workshop, we had 25 people and we created 452 idea fragments. Now, an idea fragment is that bit, the sparkly bit in the middle of an idea that's not quite an idea, but it has potential to be one. And so we created 452 of them, which we then themed, with snacks, into a bunch of different high-level themes. So we put all the stuff about AI together and all the stuff about communication together. And basically we turned it into 50 high-level themes. We then threw it back to our crowd, who were then our source of truth, the people who understood exactly what we were trying to do, and said, what can you do with this? So then they built out those idea fragments into idea briefs. They had to draw what it looked like, they had to unpack how it could work, and that turned into 46 from the 50 high-level themes to 46 idea briefs, which we then clustered again, because that's what it's all about. Go big, go small, go big, go small. It's very confusing. And so we clustered those, and then we ended up with 15 concept clusters. So all those ideas that kind of felt like they were about the same thing or could be about the same thing or were vaguely related to each other became clusters. And from those 15 clusters, we created 11 pitchable ideas. We're very excited about 11. We got to 11 and we pitched them in front of a panel of people who represented desirability, viability, and feasibility. Do we want it? Can we do it? And can we pay for it? So we had people from finance and IT and legal and customer service and throughout the organisation working with us on this part of the project. And we ended up with 4 ideas that hit the space in the middle, which was very yummy. So we turned those 4 yummy ideas into 4 prototypes, some really simple, easy, playable, build, test, learn prototypes, so we could take them on the road and talk to some people about what that could look like. We talked to people who live an hour west of Brisbane. They live in a little town called Boona. It was really important for us not to test it with city workers who looked like us, because we already liked the ideas. There was no point being, is this great? Oh yeah, it's great. Excellent, let's do it. We needed to talk to people who didn't look like us, who didn't have the same history as us, the same career as us, and the same outlook as us. So we took it to Boona. And we talked to a publican, and we talked to an arborist, and we talked to a grocery store owner, and we talked to a farmer and a school teacher. And they had some awesome things to say about our role play, about our enormous mega iPhone with scrolling text, about our FAQ timeline, and finally about the very strange placemat that you can see in front of you right now. Which apparently looks like a game board. Whoops. And that's good. It's really good to hear all those things. You want to hear that people go, this is dumb, I don't like it. This makes me angry. Or, I can see what you're trying to do here, but you're not quite right. So we took all of that back and we assembled the crew again and put all of that feedback in front of the design team, the extended design team at WorkCover. And we asked them to tell us what we should do next. So the good news is one of them got canned completely. There was no point in taking any further. All of the feedback that we got was completely different, which meant nothing was consistent. So there was no point in trying this anymore. We got learnings out of it and we will do something with those learnings, but we weren't taking it any further. The digital one, the scrolling type on the iPhone, is being scoped out by the UX team to take into digital prototyping so we can test and find out some more. And 2 of them we iterated on and took back to Boona the following week. And they became a little more high level, but still paper. We didn't want to confuse people. We wanted it to be about what is the thing, what is your interaction with the thing, and what does it mean to you. So ultimately, this project finishes tomorrow. I have to deliver the showcase at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon with a recommendations report on what we learned. So we're at delivery, and ultimately, the really exciting part about that is that if one or maybe more of these ideas actually go into production, we could make a difference in the lives of 95,000 Queensland workers every single year. And that's pretty good. For me, I think that's the benefit of really good experience design, and you can see the value because it makes sense. So, I think that there is a really good, positive and exciting future for experience design. There are certainly more and more companies who are saying they are human-centric companies or customer-centric companies. You'll see this in lots of logos and manifestos and stuff coming out at the moment from corporates all over the place. The good news is for us as designers and people who think differently and creatively and have, a bone to pick with the world, we are needed to help deliver on that. So you can't be a human-centred company without people who are human-centred. So yay for us. There is plenty of work available. My LinkedIn feed is ridiculous at the moment with so many position titles that sound like mine. So I guess I want to pass on to you that there is plenty of space here, and human-centred design and experience design and understanding what happens in the world around you is a really positive and exciting space moving forward. There are 4 things, if I summarise it all, to kind of go, well, what have I learnt in my design journey so far? And it's nowhere near the end, so I've got plenty to learn. But I think if I was to look at what I've learnt as we've been through the various strange track to get here, is to bring your whole self to the design process. As you can see, if I wasn't able to bring my trusty toolkit of curiosity and creativity and storytelling and empathy and design and research and all the other things and skills that I've learnt along the way, my interest in humans, my fascination for having a conversation with a stranger on the street, I couldn't be the experienced designer I am today without bringing all of that. So if you're secretly hiding a part of your design vocab or something you're passionate about, bring it along for the ride because you have no idea when it's going to come in handy. Be open. Open your eyes and keep your head up and open your ears and listen, because ultimately it's really important for us to hear from the voices of the people who don't look like us, sound like us, have the same background as us, live in the same places as us. We need to be looking for the people who are different, and we need to make sure that we're embracing their voice in our design process. It's really, really important. To respect the research. So I think one of the things that I've learned is that building on other people's ideas not only makes things get so much further in the long run, saves a bit of time, but you can learn from everybody else's mistakes, because how good is it to not have to make that mistake, but to learn from somebody else doing it? So keep your eyes open and learn about what's happening in the space around you, what's happened before you, what's happening in history, and how all of these things can benefit the you that you are today and the you that you're bringing to design. And finally, trust the process, because I guarantee you that there will be a day when your magical creativity button malfunctions. And it's on that day that you need to be able to rely on the fact that there is a process. Lots of people have come up with lots of different ones, and you'll work out what one works for you. But the most important thing is to trust it and know that it will always be there for you. So rely on it and work really hard on it. If nothing else, it'll be there for you, I promise. So my name's Ali, I'm an experience designer. I'm really rubbish at social media, but I'd love to continue the conversation with anybody who'd like to chat. Thanks very much.